Alternative Judaism conversion programs have long been acknowledged by the State of Israel, although not by the chief rabbinate, which controls marriage and divorce in the country. But for over 300,000 people who consider themselves Jews, the entire process is a blow to their self-definition. A report by Shahal Peled.
Who is Jewish? The question of conversion to Judaism has long been disputed in the state of the Jews. But these days, with a religiously strong right-wing Israeli government, reforms to break the monopoly of the ultra-Orthodox chief rabbinate are being struck down, and not everyone is happy.
I don't believe that the rabbinate, the chief rabbinate of Israel, is entitled to any monopoly on what the Jewish people has been able to carry out with great success for 2,000 years.
The most inherent problem of this process in Israel today is that it doesn't give you any options.
Originally from a small suburb of Moscow, Alex, like some 364,000 others, discovered only after moving to Israel that he's not considered Jewish in the eyes of the ultra-Orthodox chief rabbinate, which controls weddings and divorces in the country since the political coalition agreements of the 1950s.
In our particular case, it's about documents that got lost, and we couldn't prove that my mother's parents were Jewish on both sides.
During his military service, he was invited to join a conversion process and learn more about his Jewish roots and identity.
When I was preparing for the rabbinical court date, I started thinking, I started to ask myself questions. Why do I need their approval?
It is very difficult for someone who suddenly discovers he or she must enter an investigation process. A secular is forced to transform into a religious person. You are frequently humiliated and given the sense you should be thankful for being welcomed into a community.
Katya Kupchik heads the Association of Young Russian-speaking Israelis who had a wider sense of Judaism before immigrating to Israel.
When we were there, it felt that we belonged to the Jewish people. It was a matter of belonging and sometimes of anti-Semitism. And of course, in Israel, it turned around. There you would suffer for being Jewish. Here you would suffer for not being Jewish enough.
Indeed, when it comes to other streams of Judaism, such as conservative or reform, the Orthodox rabbinate refuses to recognize their legitimacy, although the State of Israel has done so since 2002. But David Azulai, the Israeli Minister of Religious Services, angered worldwide Jewry when he stated in a recent radio interview that he doesn't consider Reform Jews, in fact, Jewish.
Rabbi David Azulai can sit in his living room and say the Reform are not Jewish. As far as he's concerned, that's fine, it's a legitimate opinion. But being part of the Israeli government, it's not legitimate anymore.
A new initiative by the Jewish Agency attempts to ease Orthodox conversion abroad by sending recognized rabbis to assist the local communities. The reaction of the chief rabbinate to this project was hostile.
The government and chief rabbinate decided to unite all forms of Jewish conversion under one structure, so everyone will know that there is one route for all. If anyone could go abroad and convert, it will cause chaos. The best thing is order.
This argument that we've been hearing from the rabbinate doesn't hold water because the rabbinate has no authority whatsoever on Jewish communities abroad. And yet, there is no mess, there is no confusion.
Meanwhile, the proposal to widen the pool of rabbis authorizing conversions was ruled out as part of ultra-Orthodox political conditions, and rabbinical courts are set to return to the jurisdiction of the Religious Affairs Ministry, steps marking a clear path back to conservatism.
And with me right now is correspondent Shahal Peled. Shahal, good evening.
Good evening. Yeah,
so, Shahal, I'm trying to understand, because this is not a problem only of Jewish people. It's also a problem of people who don't want to be married by the rabbi, let's say, industry, let's call it, because it is an industry.
Yeah.
And it is also for people who are not Jewish.
True. This is a very, very large problem, which is touching the entire population in Israel. But if we're focusing on the reform stream, which is the most problematic following the comments by Minister Azulai, first of all, we have to say that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stepped out and said publicly that he condemns what Minister Azulai said, and this does not reflect the the spirit of the Israeli government and its position. But this isn't the first time Minister Azoulay is speaking and saying such things. Only last month, in fact, in June, he said that the reform movement is a disaster for the Israeli nation, prompting, of course, the reform leaders to call for his resignation. But he's not the only one. We've seen in recent years more than a few Israeli politicians bashing out every stream which is not orthodox in Judaism, and this, we have to say, is basically a hypocrisy. First and foremost, because in Israel the Reform and the Conservative consist of 8% of the Jewish population, and this is very similar to the Orthodox, currently around 9%. But if we look at the United States, then 35% of the Jewish population is Reform, and this is in fact
the majority of the money that is coming from the United States.
Exactly. This is in fact where the money is coming from. And according to the Pew Research Center, this is the single biggest Jewish denomination in the United States. And as Israel is mocking it, it also is depending on its money and on its support of the Jewish denomination in the United States. And an analysis by Asher Schechter in Aris newspaper, I think, put it best. He says, Israel sends Reform Jews a conflicting message. You are not Jewish enough for Israel, but your money is Jewish enough.
Of course, and it's going to Orthodox institutions
exactly,
as well.
And continuing to what you opened and said, critics believe that this represents one more step into Israel's isolation because it's withdrawal into political and religious narrow-mindedness, saying we determine who is Jew. Just like the rabbinical institution says, I have a monopoly over conversion and marriage, Israel says, I have a monopoly over Jewish identity, and this is wrong because there's very, very different streams and forms of Judaism across the world.
To get to a point where you isolate yourself as a Jewish country inside a
Very
Jewish community,
problematic.
This is something that needs to say, oh, this is a big red sign.
Yes, it is. And,
definitely.
Israel as a state should look very thoroughly into that.
Definitely. Shahal Bennett, thank you very much.
And with all this information has been helping us to understand the context and the text that is quoted in Revelation about those who are said to be Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. And it says, behold, I deliver out the synagogue of Satan, those who say they're Jews and they are not. Basically, in the first chapter also, we observe that those who claim to be Jews, it also can be someone around who claim to have faith, but they are not something following into what is the normal faith, which is the commandments of the eternal and the testimonial of Yeshua. So anyone for part of the Christianism's doctrinology or churchianity could be said, he has to fit in there as well. So we're going to read. The word Jew appears 662 times in the Bible, 77 in the Tanakh, and 585 in the Brit Hadashah. In the Tanakh, he appears in Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Jeremiah, and Daniel. In the Brit Hadashah and all the Gospels in Acts, Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, Thessalonians, Colossians, and Revelation. Currently, the term Jewish is typical of those who mainly practice the Jewish religion or who have a Jewish descent or lineage or who have made a conversion according to the Orthodox Jewish procedure approved by the State of Israel. This appointment makes them part of the Jewish identity due to mystical aspects or considering themselves as a Jewish soul that has transmigrated unto reaching the rectification, a personal procedure of each soul called tikkun in Kabbalistic terms. One Judah and another Israel, that is also called Ephraim. From that moment, which was after King Solomon, Judah began to be considered as the people of Israel, since the kingdom of Ephraim ceased to be when it's taken to exile and never again established as such, or together again. Not that never come back, but that never was established together again as the kingdom of Judah. Judah takes the principality because it was mainly the geographical region of the tribe, which Jerusalem possessed, and because by inheritance it belongs to David, a descendant of the tribe of Judah, and the principality, as Jacob prophetically said when he blesses his 12 sons. However, that principality placed more emphasis on the Messiah king who was to come than on a secular state as we know him today. The scripture says that the scepter, the government, would belong to him until the Messiah appear. And we're going to read on Genesis 49:10, the scepter of Judah shall not be removed, shall not be taken away, nor the lawgiver from between his feet, as they got all those 70 called the Sanhedrin until then, or the 70 that was established from Moses, until Shiloh comes, and the peoples will gather to him, all the nations, in other words. Genesis 26:34-35, and when Esau was 40 years old, he took as wife Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they were bitterness to the spirit of Isaac and Rebekah. On Genesis 27:46, and Rebekah said to Isaac, I am a nuisance of my wife because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob takes a wife from the daughters of Heth like these, from the daughters of this earth, why do I want a life? And take a look to the perception of Rebekah. And Genesis 36:3, we have a confirmation which these women were. Esau took his wife from the daughters of Canaan, again, Ada, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Oholibamah, the daughter of Oliabah, the daughter of Anna, the daughter of Sibeon the Hivite, and Basemath, the daughter of Ishmael, sister of Nebaioth. And well, regarding this woman who actually has a Hittite from Canaanite tribes, we see there was actually a screen from this Judith because they did not have that faith. In the text, that how they have annoyance, and finally it was not Judith, it wasn't her name. If they had this nuisance with them, it was because she didn't was a woman who really exalted the Eternal, who followed it and worshiped the Eternal properly. So we see that the name, someone who have a name, does not necessarily speak to the personality or their belief, even though we find in different personalities over the scripture, and the name has to do something with the role that they have to exposure, or the message they have to give. In this case with Judith, the name doesn't have to necessarily speak on their personality or their belief. And it's the same subject we have been talking, and that is important. It appears in many cases people bear names or acquire names without acknowledging the importance of the name. There was the story of the popes, one those whose name was Innocent. However, it was one of the bloodiest in the history of the popes. Now let's see what is corresponding to the name of Judah and Judith. So according to the Strong, on behalf of Judah, is the Hebrew word 3063, Yehudah, of his Ruth 3034, who is celebrated, Yehudah, name of 5 Israelites, also from the descendant tribe, the first and territory of Judah. So according to the concordance name, the Yud Hey Bab Dalet Hey, you can see there Yud Hey Bab Dalet Hey, again, and which pronounces Yehudah or Yahudah, depending of the grammatically, what that yod goes first along Hey, and it will be Yeh. Whatever yud goes at the end along Hey, it will be Yah. Why I'm saying this? Because this is a combination of sounds from the famous tetragrammaton, that means the eternal or the self-existent one. That is the main of Yehudah when we talk about here on the Yahudah. So then this name is actually would be Yeh. That is the eternal. The eternal is celebrated with the hands, or Yehudah would be like the who exalts the eternal, all right? or the eternal is exalted with the hands. With the hands. So yada, the root yada from the Hebrew word of the root of Yehuda is yada. Yud Dalet Hey, which is a Hebrew word 3034, primary root used not only to denominate, it is used to extend the right hand, to extend the left hands, to a stone in arrow through in or the distance specifics of relevance to exalt with outstretched hands, and acclaim, to praise, to sing, to celebrate, to confess, confession, give, declare, demolish, exalt, glorify, or to give thanks, put, thrown away. Okay, so we're gonna have one more, and this one more time in the text, which says, praise the eternal, but in a way of the exaltation of reverence and recognition, for this is the name of Yehuda, and stop giving birth. We're gonna see down here, and in Genesis 25:35, she conceived again and gave birth to a son, and said, this name I will worship, or will exalt. But when you come to exalt eternal, which is Oda, Ode Adonai, Bechol Levi, as the Psalm says, the Psalm 8:9, I don't remember. We're gonna see at the end of the presentations. Ode Adonai, Bechol Levi, Eshmecha Bet Sabah, and I will exalt you, eternal, with all my heart. For this, I will raise my hand to the eternal. For this, she called his name Yehuda, Yuda, and stopped giving birth. So, Apam Oda et Adonai, I will raise my hand to exalt the eternal, to exalt Adonai. Okay, text, and the first one we're gonna see in 1 Kings 8:22. Then Solomon stood before the altar of the Adonai, and the presence of all the congregation of Israel, and stretched out his hands to heaven, and said, stretch his hands to the heaven. Yada. Daniel 12:7, and I heard a man clothed in linen who was on the waters on the river, who lifted up his right and left hands to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, the eternal. There's no Hebrew expression here. You can do your own homework, so you can search if that's right or not, but that would be Oda, Yaoda, Yeode, Adonai, eternal. And Revelations 10:5, and the angel that I saw standing on the sea and on the earth raised his hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever. Again, swearing for the eternal. Putting yourself in serve to the eternal Father. So the word praise in Hebrew, Hilul, which means rejoicing, celebration, thanksgiving, it comes from the root halal, which means to speak praisingly, or to a cause of celebrate, acclaim. In some worship, it says to word of, the praise of. That's why you have the hallelujah. It's turned to roar, to boast, to glorify, to greatly jubilation, etc. To rise, to shine. But that word is not used in the text of the birth of Judah or Yehuda. That text is not that in there. We don't see that word in Hebrew, which is Hilul. It does not say Hallel Yah. Hallel is a rejoice, is acclaim. And the tetragrammaton Yah, Yada, Yehuda, in other means. And that will mean the eternal is exalted. Yud He and Ode, or eternal plus hand, which means the eternal is exalted, or raised exaltation to the eternal. And then that would be the name. The sound Yehuda, but the grammar rule sounds Yehuda. By grammar sounds Yehuda. We have already studied that the tetragrammaton is the combination of the verb to be conjugated or getting together, as the Eternal said to Moshe, Ehe asher Ehe. For that reason, it does not have phonetics, or you would have its vertical phonetic combinations that we see of the different dogmatic systems to put the name of the Eternal. And let's see what is this. Let's see how Paul covers this topic on Romans, on Romim, on 2:17-29. Behold, you have the nickname of Jew, and you lean on the law, and you exalt your Elohim, you glorify in Elohim, and you know his will, and instructed by the law, you approve of the best, and trust that you are guide of the blind, light of those who are in darkness, see, because he knows the law, instructor of the unlearned, teacher of the children, who have in the law from the science and truth. I want to remark this. He who knows the law, the truth, the instruction, Torah, who have in the law the form of science and truth. You then he approached to him, who teach another, do you not teach yourself? You who preach that is not to be stolen, do you steal? You who say that is not to be adulterated, do you adulterate? You who abhor adore idols, do you commit sacrilege? You who boast in the law, do you dishonor Elohim by breaking the law? Dishonor your God by breaking the law? Do you do that? For as is written, he is reminded that false Jew, for us is written, the name of Elohim, the name of Adonai is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. For indeed circumcision benefits if you keep the law, but if you are a transgressor of the Torah, your circumcision becomes incircumcision. He keeps saying, for he is not a Jew who is not outwardly, means in the flesh or outside, neither in circumcision, that is which outward in flesh, but a Jew is he who is so inwardly, in circumcision of the heart, in spirit, not in letter, is even written down on Torah, of which the praise of is not of man but from Elohim. That ends up in Romans 2:29, 28-29. Because of you, and there is obviously targeted to those who nickname of Jews. There's Paul is establishing and clarifying who is really a Jew, and end up saying Jew is the one who is by heart. You have to wonder why. Because a Jew is not the one who has the name, is not the one who born inside of a lineage, is not the one who did the conversion. None of that. Those are just tradition of men. Same thing happens into the Christianity. He's not the one who do a baptism, or not because of you have a diploma from your church. Jew, a true believer, is the one who has all the real change, a true change after Teshuvah, coming back to the Father, and entry into the redemption through Yeshua. When we do that, to turn to the Father, that way we become a real Yahudim, the real one who exalts the eternal Father. I am not talking about placing ourselves a little, we are Jews, but instead I'm talking of the true essence of the life of faith. Yahudi is not a title, is in which we have a contribute just because. Yehudi is the one who really exalts and raises the Father with their hand, with all his power, with all his mind, with all his heart, with all his life, to recognize him and say, you are the eternal Almighty, the only one, that you have rescued me through Yeshua. And obviously, having Yeshua as our guidance, there is no other better way to exalt the eternal than to follow the steps of his Son, the only way to the Father, Yeshua. Yeshua said, the Father is looking for real servers, because the correct word in Hebrew is avodah, service, but it's translated as a worship, and it's saying eternal is looking for true surrendered souls that exalt the eternal, that serves him, that are willing to everything in order to defend the faith, that as a real Yahudi.